Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Ask ServiceMonster show, where you've got questions for your service business, and we've got your answers. Today's question comes from Andy. He wants to know what's the process that he can go through to ensure he's hiring good employees. Now, we've talked about employees before. We'll put a link in the show notes, and it was a pretty good episode. It was more holistic about what you're looking for and how you cultivate those employees. But I'm going to talk about the actual process in this episode. Pre-interview, during the interview, and post-interview. What are you looking for? What are you looking to set up? And how do you ensure that the people you bring have the highest possible chance of success? Real quick, brief shameless plug, ICE, February 1st in Las Vegas. I will be speaking on this very topic, an hour long on the main stage. So if you're interested in that or you're coming by ICE, stop by and we'll go over this in detail, how to build a company, culture, growth, hiring employees, and making sure that you're scaling in a way that leaves you some sanity. Before I get started, how do we do a base setup for success? The mentality that you need as a business owner. There are a couple things that I want to kind of touch on, but does this process sound familiar? You put an ad out for a job. You get 20 resumes. 8 of them are valid. 4 of them actually answer their phone. 2 show up for the interview, and the person you really want moved on someplace else. And so what do? You bring in person B, and within 3 or 4 weeks, you realize, this was not a good idea. And then you either justify trying to keep them around or cut them loose and start all over. So before we get started, I really want you to understand hire slow, fire fast. And I'll be talking about that throughout this particular video, but man, I still have problems with this a little bit. Like, this is something that we're continually evolving on. The hire slow is a real deal. You may go through 3 or 4 or 5 rounds if you're really doing it right to find the good person. And I know that when you're really looking for somebody to fill hours and push the wand, an extra set of hands, do you really just care or do you just want a body? It's a big deal, so care. All right, so let's talk about the pre-interview, because before you even send out a job description, there's some fundamental things that you need to get right in your business. You want to be able to define your company culture. Like, what are you trying to build? Honesty, integrity, good work, craftsmanship, speed, do what you say you're going to do, follow up, follow through. All those things are important. And if you're not building a company culture that makes those things important, they won't be important to your employees. And if they're not important to you, then you can't make them important no matter what. Company culture will often fit the face of the leadership. And so understand what kind of company you want to build. Figure out what kind of culture you want to build and what skills do you have to ensure that success. Another very important thing to do is reverse engineer the job you're hiring for. Again, you're not just looking for a body, someone who could just push a wand. You're looking for a person. You want to identify who is this person. Kind of in your mind, have conversations with them. Establish who they are. Paint a picture of them. Give them personality traits. Again, reverse engineering the job. And you do that by writing down a job description. I don't care if it's super simple, doesn't really matter. Write it down. And make 7 to 10 items, points, that they're going to be responsible for. When you have that, it makes a big difference in how you're bringing those people in, them knowing what's expected of them, and you being able to measure them down the road. Another reason why job descriptions are so important is you can leverage them and use them for performance reviews to make sure that your employee is staying on track. When you advertise for your job position, make sure you're doing it both internally in your organization and externally. If you already have a thriving business and you have 10 or 12 employees, amazing employees know amazing people. And so we found it very successful to ask around. A lot of times amazing people will be like, I don't really have any amazing friends. And so that honesty is good, but sometimes they will. And when they bring those individuals into an organization, man, it's amazing the cohesion. All right, So you've been through the resumes that have come in, you've weeded them out. Now let's talk about the interview process. Again, a little pre-interview, going through those resumes, what are you looking for there? Obviously, there's a handful of those resumes that are just gonna be people pushing them out to fulfill their unemployment requirement. Like 50% of what we get is just junk that has nothing to do with the job position that we're advertising for. So those just go to the recycle bin. Now, in my corporate days, I used to be pretty stingent on what I would like to see in a resume, typos and grammatical errors. But if the job description isn't spelled perfectly, then am I going to really throw a resume out just because they misspelled a word? I find that hard to do now because we found really good people that may have been grammatically incorrect on their cover letter. There are some warning flags that you can look for though. Obviously, attention to detail is a big thing, right? So grammar and spelling can be put into that bucket. I'm not saying egregious, right, text to speak, like it's gotta be a good written piece and legible. They have to communicate well. So that's first, but if they've got one or two little errors, you might wanna overlook that. Some other warning points though, job hopping, right? If they're every 6 months, they're in a different position for the last 6 years, big warning flag, probably an employee you wanna pass on. Another thing to be mindful of in that employee history are big gaps. Now, this doesn't mean that you should just toss the resume, but certainly have a discussion about them. Hey, I noticed you weren't really working for the last 2 years. Talk to me about that. Where were you? What was your life like? And just kind of get an understanding and grounding on it. But it is a warning flag, something that you want to chat about. Another thing that may not happen to you too often, but does happen here a lot, so I want to touch on it. Overqualified. People who submit their resume who have a college education doing something completely unrelated where the job field pays 4 times as much. What are you doing, dude? Have the conversation. Don't necessarily just toss it, but be upfront. I can only pay you X, and I understand that maybe, this isn't in alignment with what your education is. Talk to me about what you're going through, why you want this job. Get an understanding for that. Sometimes it's just a change of life thing, and we found some pretty good employees going through that process. All right, so now you've got the resume, you've looked through it, you've weeded out the bad ones, and you've got a small stack to go through. Start making phone calls. And the conversation you're looking to have is a connection. This isn't a full-fledged interview, right? You want to touch on some of the egregious things that you still wanted to call the person, but you have these 2 or 3 items you really need to talk about. You're overqualified, let's talk about that and what we can pay you. Your gaps in your job history, let's chat about that. Or anything that you might be concerned. But again, you're looking for a connection. This phone call should be fairly short, probably about 10 or 15 minutes long. If they can do it just by you call and they answer it, that's awesome. But I find that it's very difficult to get that person to pick up the phone. I am certainly picking up my phone less and less these days without a pre-appointment, right? So it's a cultural thing. Like, how do you approach that? Leave the message and see if they'll call you back. That follow through is important. These early stages in the interview process are really important because it's a honeymoon period. I guarantee you it's not going to get better. If they're lagging on when they get back to you, or it's a little sketchy on that first phone interview, man, just don't even worry about it. Move on. Okay, so what does the in-person interview look like? Obviously, they've got to be on time. They've got to be dressed the part. Although I've had to deal with some leniency on this. I had one of my favorite very early employees come to the interview in Birkenstocks. And it was a big point of contention for Eric and I. We talked a lot about it after he had left. But when we talked to him about it and helped him understand the importance, and when he came to work, he did an amazing job. So, again, be lenient, but at the same time, there's certain expectations that should be met. And the more things that start stacking up against them, the more you should consider going with somebody else. Get the team involved. So if you've got a couple people already, they're going to be part of your culture. Hiring a new person is going to change your culture. I don't care how many employees you have. So do you want to change it in the right direction? Do you want to take it in another direction? Or do you want them going against the culture altogether? Putting the teammates in place during the interview will help build cohesiveness and plus give you a point of view that maybe you can't see. Maybe somebody sitting at the table will see something in that person that will be a benefit or a detriment to the company that you just completely missed. One of my favorite parts of the interview process is to toss the resume. Like, I get the basic questions based off the resume out, but again, we're hiring a person. I'm not hiring a piece of paper, and I visually make that distinction. I will oftentimes throw or crumple up or just toss aside the resume and say, forget about this. And I want their origin story. So I'm going to give them 15 or 20 minutes to talk about their origin story, their backstory. And I usually want them to start somewhere in high school, some of the highlights from high school, and then moving on and taking me through their whole arc. What are they passionate about? Where'd they go? Did they move around? Did they try different things? Like letting that person tell the story of their life really gives you a feel for who they are. Maybe even less relevant than the story they tell. It's how they tell it. It's what they're passionate about. It's what they're inspired. Now, if they're meek and their story is really brief and they don't really give themselves any props and you're not taken through an actual journey, they're going to suck as a salesperson, right? So knowing, again, reverse engineering, looking at the job description, kind of identifying the type of person that you want, and then lining that up against their storytelling and their origin story. Now, of course, you're going to be looking for experiences related to that job description. Again, that's why it's so important to document. And we can say, hey, you've read the job description. Here's those main 7 to 10 things you're going to be responsible for. How are your past? How is your experience aligned up here so that we can make sure that we're setting you up for success? Now, in the video I'd referred to before, we talk about some traits that we look for here at ServiceMonster. But I've also come across some other traits that other employers look at that I feel kind of fits with the nature and the spirit of what we were talking about. Michael Hyatt identifies 4 key traits that he looks for in employees: humble, hungry, honest, and smart. And I would say that's pretty good alignment of what we do here, right? Loyalty, honesty, that's going to cross over. I certainly look for intelligent and passionate people. And then that humble aspect, being able to take direction, not step outside their box. It's important. So looking for those 4 traits during the interview process, man, if you're not seeing that, or if you're getting clues that maybe they're not 100% honest, don't do it. Hire slow. Now, I never liked the sound of one hand clapping. And for a long time here at ServiceMonster, I've tried to ensure that we always have at least 2 in-person interviews to play off of each other. It's really, really hard to just have the one person and then say, well, we need to fill the position, and then just put them in it. That's why we really want to make sure that we've got at least 2 people jockeying for the position. All right, so you finish the interview, you've met with the team afterwards, you guys are all glowy and feel really good. Now what? The post-interview process. Very important. So the first thing you want to do, obviously, is references and background check. Don't skip this step. There are companies that you can hire for a reasonable fee that will do the background check for you. Do it. Do it. Don't skip this step. When we're talking to previous employers, one of the things that we really look for is excitement. Would you hire this person again? And if they're like, yeah, man, I can't believe I lost this person, they will let you know. It will be very apparent. They will be very excited in how they communicate with you. If they don't, it's a clear warning. Now, you want to be careful here. You can open yourself up to liability by asking the wrong questions. And most questions are the wrong questions when communicating with a previous employer. So make sure you clearly understand your state laws and the federal ones to make sure that you're adhering to those and not opening yourself up to liability. But again, you're looking for that excitement from the other person. Now, when you extend the offer to the would-be employee, make sure it's in writing. Submit it via email and make sure that it's clearly defined. Include that job description, the pay, when they're going to start, who their direct report is, and what time you expect them on their first day. And when they show up, have a clear plan. Again, back to that job description. How are you going to train them? It would be nice to have SOPs or standard operating procedures already created for the position and job. Obviously, if you're a brand new company and you only have 1 or 2 employees, that's unrealistic. But as you start to approach more, 4, 5, 6 employees, you better get some SOPs lined up because it's just going to make the training process so much simpler. And have a plan. An actual training plan. Hey, today I'm gonna sit you with Bruce and you're gonna listen to phone calls, and then on day number 2, you're gonna sit with the guys in the truck and help them unload and prep the vehicles. Have a plan is the point, and then execute on that plan. Don't let an employee languish or sit around like, what am I supposed to do? Have a real plan, and don't let the employee just kind of sit around wondering what they're supposed to be doing. And once you have a good employee, make sure you keep them. Listen to them. Be empathetic. What are their goals and dreams? And then fire fast. When somebody starts playing the political game, it's like cancer in the company. So if there's an issue, obviously you want to have a conversation. You don't want to catch the employee on surprise, like they show up and they have no idea. That's never a good thing. Give them an opportunity, but hit it straight on. Sit down with them and say, look, we got a problem. And this is something that you're gonna need to address. Otherwise, you can't work here anymore. You need to be that frank. And then outline the problem and the expectations and steps that you want them to take to correct it. And if they don't, that's just that fast. Again, pay attention to your state. Luckily, here in Washington, we're an at-will state. So we can literally just say, hey, you don't fit within the company culture. Sorry, please go find something else. And that's hard. Even when you have good people, sometimes they don't fit within the culture or the position is wrong. In my corporate experience, I hired an amazingly brilliant person, caused friction all over the place because they kept stepping into other people's lanes. They didn't have clear understanding of where their boundaries were. And even though they were amazing and they provided a lot of power to the company, and they just created a toxic environment and we had to get rid of them. Don't hum and haw about it. I know you guys because I am you, right? I have had those sleepless nights, like, what are we gonna do? And waiting, and then maybe things will get better, and then let's have another discussion and let's do another write-up, and then other employees are starting to ask questions and things are getting weird. So again, fire fast. When you identify and you know it in your gut, it's time, make it time. All right, guys, wrapping up, just 3 main points. Number 1, obviously, hire slow, fire fast. Number 2, set up a strong company culture. Make sure you've defined it and that you're, moving that in the right direction with the people that you hire. And number 3, reverse engineer the position that you want. Job description, the kind of person that you're looking to put in, and how they're gonna accomplish success within your organization. Until next time, guys, subscribe to our YouTube channel, go check out the demo, and give us a call.